No. The answer is no. It's not the worst movie. It's not even close to being a bad movie. It's actually pretty good. You'll see some reactions online saying this movie is terrible or mid, and I'm here to tell you that those people are hyperbolic and wrong and have forgotten what joy feels like. Now that being said, does this movie need to exist? Meaning, did we really need another sequel after the last movie, which in my opinion ended pretty definitively? Well, on a scale from Toy Story 4, a sequel that really doesn't add anything but does ruin a perfectly good ending from Toy Story 3, or to something like, I don't know, Puss in Boots 2, a sequel that nobody really asked for. Seriously, who actually wanted another Puss in Boots movie? And it wound up being an excellent movie, with great characterization, action, animation, humor, plot, and genuine changes for its lead character. I'd say, somewhere like here. In this review, I'll be going over the pros, the cons, and what could be improved in my opinion, as well as how it stacks up to the other movies. If you disagree, please don't say anything. But before we begin on the critical analysis, let's do a quick plot summary, so spoilers ahead for Kung Fu Panda 4. The movie begins with Tai Lung seemingly coming back to life. Watch the first movie. He sets fire to a goat village and tells the citizens to spread his name far and wide. We then shift back to Po, being the Dragon Warrior, stopping some villain of the week, and returns home to open a new restaurant with his two dads. Watch the last movie. However, Master Shifu, first movie, tells Po that he must choose a successor for the Dragon Warrior so that Po can ascend to be the spiritual leader of the Valley of Peace. Which, I guess he wasn't that already? Like, look at him literally leading everyone in a spiritual way, whatever. Po isn't quite ready to give that up, so he decides not to choose someone. Master Shifu insists he makes a choice now, but before he can figure out what to do, he runs into a thief trying to steal shit out of the Jade Palace. Enter Awkwafina. I forget this character's name, so I'm just gonna call her Awkwafina from now on. They fight, Po captures her, and the citizens run in to let him know that Tai Lung is back. Po freaks out because his KD went from 3 to 2, and is immediately told by Awkwafina that it's not Tai Lung, but instead the Chameleon, a shape-shifting sorceress that can transform and disguise herself as anybody. Which, to be honest, I don't even know why they bothered to say Tai Lung is back if they were going to immediately spoil the reveal to Po before he even has time to process that his nemesis returned. Whatever. Anyway, Awkwafina and Po team up to find and defeat the Chameleon. If you're wondering where the Furious Five are, they're not here, they're busy getting cigarettes and milk, and they'll be back soon, they have assured me. Back to the movie. From this point on, it's mostly hijinks and shenanigans from Po and Awkwafina, and the Chameleon begins her plan to bring the strongest evil Kung Fu masters back to life to space jam their Kung Fu talent into herself and become the ultimate warrior. Po is rescued by his dads, given a life lesson that change is good, and goes back to fight the Chameleon. They fight a pretty cool fight, and by the end of it, Awkwafina steps up, lands some good hits in, and Po ultimately defeats the Chameleon. Tai Lung and the other villain spirits bow to Po out of respect and return home to the spirit world, taking the Chameleon with them, effectively killing her. I guess. Po decides that he's ready to choose a successor and decides Awkwafina will be the next Dragon Warrior. Then the movie ends with the Furious Five coming back, although they all have sore throats and they can't say anything, and training Awkwafina to be the next Dragon Warrior while Po sings a cover of Hit Me Baby One More Time. Okay, got it? Good. Now on to the analysis and pros and cons. Pros. The new characters. This movie introduces a bunch of brand new characters and designs as a franchise like Awkwafina and the Chameleon. I thought I wasn't going to like Awkwafina's character based on the trailers and the fact that she is just f***ing everywhere. But she does a great job and I'm happy to keep her around for future movies. Though I do wish that her design was closer to her wanted poster instead of that Zootopia furry Disney face. Now, the Chameleon as a concept is cool. Her transformations into other fighters to use their skills, while also keeping her chameleon-like texture is a cool detail. Also, her fighting as Po, or Tai Lung, or even as a chimera dragon thing of everyone put together is really creative. Although at that point she isn't even using Kung Fu anymore, but whatever. There's some stuff that I'm not a fan of her, mostly with her character, but we can discuss that in the cons section. Po's growth. I think this movie does a really good job of growing Po as a character. Each movie seems to add a new layer of maturity to Po, from Kung Fu fanboy to spiritual leader of the valley. If a sequel movie doesn't change their main character in any way and simply returns them to the status quo, why even bother? For that alone, I don't really think anyone can call this movie unnecessary. On top of the character side of things, you can also see an immense growth in Po's combat abilities. You'll notice how Po is now extremely competent at fighting, which duh, he's been the Dragon Warrior for 3 movies now, right? But what I mean is, Po is not only kicking ass, but he seems to be completely in control most of the time. There's this scene in the movie where he gets into a bar fight, and not only is he fighting like 10 plus dudes at the same time, but he's also returning their wallets to them with perfect precision and balance. while that would be impressive enough on its own, more importantly, he's also fighting in such a way that doesn't truly hurt them. I'm sure they based this off a real martial arts style, but Po is almost never throwing a direct punch into someone's face, and instead opts to catch people with his palms and redirect them to the side, pacifying them rather than breaking their bones. He does this the entire movie, until maybe the end when he's fighting the chameleon. This level of mastery reminds me of Tai Lung from the first movie, where he's basically invincible and defeated like 1,000 rhino guards while styling all over them. I really don't feel like Po could have replicated a feat like that until this movie, where I get the feeling he definitely can now. Strong themes. Themes? What are we, back in school? Sit down! The main theme of this movie is change. More specifically, change is a good thing. Po's initial resistance to giving up the Dragon Warrior title drives a large part of this movie, as well as asking Awkwafina to change from thief to hero, something she doesn't initially want to do as well. By the end of the movie, both characters have chosen to change with the times and accept the next chapter in their lives, something the villain doesn't do. Speaking of, the chameleon is an interesting foil to Po. At one point, she admits she literally changes all the time, and Po responds, but not on the inside. Earlier in the movie, Chameleon tells Awkwafina, "The day you stop being useful is the day I get rid of you, so for both our sakes, don't ever change." All of this culminating with Po's dad imparting the lesson that yes, change is scary, but ultimately can be a good thing and make you better than the person you already are. I just think it's neat.
I just think they're neat.
The little things. Here are some more rapid-fire things I enjoyed about the movie. It looks great, the soundtrack is pretty good, there's a Chinese rendition of Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. By the way, more movies should do this rather than straight up inserting a pop song. I'm looking at you, Mario movie. Po's dad's storyline is cute and fun, and I love how sassy and protective they are over their son. The Den of Thieves are fun, especially the bunny rabbit kids. And the idea of bringing back old villains is an interesting concept, and it works on paper, but this will lead into the cons. Missed opportunities. So a massive part of the marketing for this movie is the fact that old villains would be returning, with the biggest focus being on Tai Lung. I mean, this fucker is all over the marketing, the trailers, the ads, front and center on the poster, and yet he only shows up for the final 10 minutes of the movie, if that. And he spends most of the time in a cage. Now, don't get me wrong, the few minutes he's in the movie, he still manages to steal the show. It just kind of feels like it's a bait and switch to feature him so heavily in the advertisements only to not really use him at all. I have no voice and I must scream. A lot of major players from the previous movies are featured in this movie and they don't say anything at all. Look man, I know that hiring all those big name actors is expensive, but if you're gonna sell your movie as Po facing all of his old foes and especially redeeming them at the end, don't worry, we're gonna get to that in a minute, then you should actually try to get the actors or at least some sound-alikes. As soon as the movie opens, we get excuses as to why none of the Furious 5 are back, and like, I get why they do it, but it does hurt the movie at a certain point. The Chameleon. So while I think the Chameleon is a cool idea on paper, the execution on her character isn't really all that great. Her entire motivation is that she wants to learn Kung Fu, but she was turned away from every master because she was quote-unquote too small. Which, I mean, fair enough, but that reason falls apart almost instantaneously when you have a character like Mantis, who is not only a Kung Fu master, but has also literally held an entire rope bridge and 5 people fighting on it by himself. Too small, my ass. On top of this, the Chameleon doesn't really do anything that's super threatening throughout the movie before the final battle. The worst she does is push a guy down the stairs. Okay. Compare that to Tai Lung defeating 1,000 rhinos and breaking out of prison, or Shen that not only fights but kills various masters with his firework cannon. The Chameleon is just kinda lame in comparison. She's not the worst or even a bad villain, she's just not a very good one. The redemption. So this is probably the hardest that the movie drops the ball. After bringing back all of Po's villains for 10 minutes, once Po defeats the Chameleon, they all bow in respect to Po. Yes, including the dude that genocided Po's family and made him an endangered species. The worst part is that none of them say anything. Without it, these guys have zero reason to pay Po any respect. We have no idea what they're thinking or feeling, and you might as well not have even brought them back at all because they have zero agency in this movie. And while I really do like the idea of Tai Lung getting a redemption, it happens so quickly it doesn't really feel earned. Tai Lung comes back, spends most of the time in a cage, and Po and him barely speak to each other. Once Po defeats the chameleon, all of a sudden Tai Lung is not only cool with Po, but fully gives up on his dream and accepts Po as the true dragon warrior. Why? Where did that come from? How did Tai Lung get to that point from being stuck in a cage? If you're gonna put Tai Lung all over the advertisements, you really should have done more with the character. And redemption would have been a great idea. But as it stands right now, it's just a massively missed opportunity. So what would I have done differently? Look, I'm not going to pretend I'm a better writer than the people that made this movie, but I have a few ideas of how you could potentially fix these issues with the pieces they already had.
Yeah, that's one fine-looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that?
When the movie begins, quote-unquote Tai Lung is causing damage, Po is made aware of his existence and immediately learns it's not him. Instead, what should happen is first, keep this information hidden from Po a little bit longer and Master Shifu hears about it. I'm sure Shifu would be very interested to know that Tai Lung came back. I don't think Shifu is even told his student / basically adopted son came back in the actual movie. Okay, anyway, in addition to what I said, the chameleon manages to summon just one person without the staff, Tai Lung, and steals the majority of his kung fu, but Tai Lung manages to get away before she can finish taking it completely, and leaves to seek out Po and the Valley of Peace. The chameleon, learning just how much power one person gives you, decides to go all out and target Po's staff. Introducing Tai Lung at the beginning of the movie gives him time to truly butt heads with Po, and gives him plenty of time to build a believable redemption arc and realize that Po is the true dragon warrior by the end of the movie. Okay, and while I really do like the B plot in this movie, rather than devoting so much time to Po's dads, remove most of their screen time, but you can keep the lesson about change being good, and instead give the remaining time to Tai Lung and Master Shifu. They can be the ones chasing after Po or doing their own thing throughout the movie. This would actually give Shifu something to do instead of just being a semi-funny, grumpy old man, and it would also give Shifu and Tai Lung an opportunity to fix their relationship because it ended really, really badly in the first movie. Just take a look at this scene.
I'm sorry.
I don't want your apology. I want my scroll!
You can even see a glimmer of regret, sadness all over Tai Lung's face when Shifu apologizes to him. With the Tai Lung and Shifu beat plot in Kung Fu Panda 4, they really could have expanded on this whole storyline and truly made Tai Lung a good guy by the end of it. And that's pretty much it. That's how I would quote-unquote fix Kung Fu Panda 4. Overall, I really did enjoy this movie despite my complaints. I'd give it like a 7.5 in total. Comparing it to the first three movies, Kung Fu Panda 1 is my favorite movie of all time, and 2 is also amazing, but I'd say I think I like 4 more than I liked 3. Here's a tier list that you crazy kids like so much. But before we end the video, let's end on one more positive note. I think Jack Black singing Hit Me Baby One More Time is worth the price of admission alone. This song kicks ass, and no, I do not care that the song almost has nothing to do with Kung Fu Panda outside of saying hit me. No, I will not be taking questions at this time. Now perish.
Skadoosh.